Howdy, folks. Welcome back to JJ's Library and Readings. So good to be recording today. I hope y'all are doing well. Uh, it's a little late for me, but I decided did silence in the background is better. I hope y'all are doing well. Hope you went to the gym, did some cardio, and I hope you're comfy at home, drinking your coffee and smoking your cob. I say let's get into it. So, Between Two Fires, Chapter 21. Of the Fishers of Men. I told you to go back to sleep, Thomas whispered to the priest. They stood in the front of the raft, watching the fat orange sun sink on their right. I can't sleep. I'm too agitated. How are you going to keep watch tonight? I don't know. For Christ's love, Father, perhaps you should sleep now and keep watch later. I should be awake when they are. Both men turned to look at the men on the rowers, who were moving them back and forth with their strong brown arms to add a little speed. The younger of the two was missing an ear, a thief. The captain sat atop the cabin, eating salted herring and drinking beer from a goatskin. He was a lanky, untrustworthy, but highly intelligent fellow with perhaps the most decisively separated walleyes Thomas had ever seen. While negotiating the outrageous price of passage with these rivermen, who were clearly more pirates than raftsmen, it had been difficult to figure out where the captain was resting his gaze. He had undoubtedly used this to his advantage. In business as well as war, though he was clearly not half the warrior his first mate was. The fourth man, the strong one, bent and cocked two more crossbows, his arms getting thicker as he used his muzzle to work the windlass. He had the look of a wrestler, the kind who fought for small purses at fairs, and won them. Once he had fitted the deadly iron-tipped bolts into their grooves and dropped the bows against the cabin, he removed the bolts from the cocked ones and discharged them. Resting the crosspiece, Thomas said. The man knew this weapon. Some of them will have to sleep. Yes, probably two while the others steer. I can watch all four of them at once. Can you? Better than I can at night. I don't see as well as night as I used to. Thomas threw up his hands and stepped over Delphine, who was sleeping sadly at their feet, using Thomas's leather satchel as a pillow. She had made it her practice to sleep or sit on the satchel whenever possible, as it contained their remaining gold and silver coins, as well as a handful of rings and necklaces left from the spoils of Thomas's prignonage. The three of them would be in mortal danger if their host got a look in the bag, or if the men seemed to be guarding it. The captain came up to the front low, leaning on his pole. He spoke to them for the first time since they come to terms at the docks. Tornis, he said, pointing his long spear at a cluster of houses over which the two towers of a church peered. Two men with cloths around their noses unloaded three women and a dead Benedictine monk into the water. One of these used a pole to push them out into the current. Greetings, friend, the captain shouted at them. It is not a merry day to feed the fish? Merrier still, if for you to feed them a fisher of men. The carters looked up, one of them twitching his arm, as though he thought to make a rude gesture, but reconsidered when he saw the blue fish on red strung over the cabin. This was the signal of the Guild of Simon Peter, the disarming name used by the ring of pirates that controlled the Saône all the way to the Lion. Merry enough, one shouted back submissively, and they turned their backs and wheeled their cart away. The bodies floated near the raft for a short way, as though trying to keep up. Sad bastard dolphins, we have to play in our wake, the captain said, spittle flying from his lips. He turned to face his guests. Have you been to the sea? As it was not possible to tell which one of these he was looking at, both men said, No. Too bad, he said. You may have missed your chance. There's talk of the sea turning to gravel soon. Or was it glass? Or maybe it was just roll out and keep rolling and never come back. But that's not all bad. I'd like to have a look at what's on the bottom. Maybe come back with a mermaid's ribs for a hat, eh? Neither man responded. Eh? He said again a bit more forcefully. As you say, said the priest. He nodded happily, satisfied. There was something weak in this man, Thomas thought. Something that needed to be told he was in charge. Where stronger men just knew it. The one with the hammy arms would be captain soon, if he wanted it. Maybe he was more like Thomas had been, though. Happy to fight and take his share until he was given the wrong order. Captain, one of the oarsmen said, the plaguey geezer's about to bump us. The captain turned his attention to where the monk floated on his back, as if at leisure, with his arms trailing behind him. His face, though waxy from the sickness, looked beautiful in the rippled orange water. The captain used his spear to push the dead man further off. You would have liked to float with your arms outstretched like our Lord, would you not? Float to glory like our Lord? Maybe you weren't such a good monk as you thought. Go and ask St. Philbert, said Dolphin. Now he called back at the oarsman. Is it St. Philbert, that abbey? It is, the oarsman said. It is important to know the name of things, he said, as to himself. Thomas woke to the girl's fingers pinching his nose. He slapped her hand away and reached for the hilt of his sword, but she held a finger to his lips, then pointed. It was just dawn. The river seemed a mirror of itself from the night before, just the same rose-orange light in the sky and reflected on the water. Only now the red ball of the sun was on their left. The rivermen were arming themselves. Thomas kicked the priest, who sat up quickly with fish scales on his cheek, so startled he broke wind. The raft was closing in on a larger vessel, a barge, riding low in the water with its cargo of stone from the quarries near Tournus. A half-dozen stout fellows stood watching the raft approach. It was clear to Thomas that they didn't know whether they should arm themselves, provoke a fight, or allow themselves to be boarded. Their inaction made the decision for them. The captain came over to Thomas now, assaulting him with the oniony smell of his recently dyed yellow shirt, saying, You'll help us. I doubt it will come to blows, but stand with your sword ready as if you're one of us. Thomas stood, giving his friend a reassured look. He didn't believe the bargeman had the stomach for a fight. Still, he traded his straw hat for his chain hood and helmet. You know who we are? The captain shouted. Simon Peter's Guild, the captain of the other boat said. Where's your banner? The bargeman said nothing. How am I to know you paid tribute if you don't fly the proper banner? I haven't paid. No worries, friend. You can pay now. So saying, he grabbed up a pole hook from the bow and pulled the raft snug up against the barge. The two oarsmen held crossbows now, and the captain, Big Arms, had Thomas all stepped onto their ship. The men suffered their boat to be completely looted, losing all their food, a cask of wine, and a small box of coins that the crew would later make impressed noises over, even though it was slightly less than Thomas and the priest together carried. All the while Thomas stood at the ready. Though he was embarrassed enough to be back at his old vocation, that he didn't return his hateful glare of the one of the young bargemen, who seemed to be working himself up to act foolishly. Instead, the massive armored man with the scarred cheek and broken nose looked mildly at the boy and said, Don't. The boy didn't. Do we at least get our whoring banner so we don't get robbed up next to the lot? The raft captain, taking up his long spear, said, But you haven't sold your stone yet. This was only half the necessary amount. You'll have to settle accounts with the next boat, but as a personal favor, I will allow you to keep your cargo. You sure, Captain? One of the oarsmen said, chuckling a bellish chuckle. That's some real nice granite. I could build a hell of a bridge with granite like that. No, theory. Fair is fair. Let them keep it. Thanks, the barge captain said. You're a real friend. The captain lost his wagging dog look and his voice shed its false good humor. I'm a better friend than you know, you fat whoring slug. You've been very lucky today only because of my Christian spirit. If you'd like to remember me at Mass, my name is Carolus. So saying, the Wade pirate pushed off with the spear, leaving the granite barge to drift. The raft moved down the river without incident over the next days. The girls slept on the night satchel by day and watched over Thomas and the priest when their sleeping hours overlapped. All the way to Lyon, where the Saône married the glacier-cooled Rhone and took its name. This was the biggest town on the river until Avignon, and the captain and both oarsmen were willing to take their chances with the plague, no sample her remaining pleasures. Big Arms stayed on the raft. You roll dice, the pirate asked Thomas. Every day I wake up in this world, same as you. Big Arms liked that, and took it as a yes, producing pig-knuckle dice. The two soldiers gambled for small coins, Big Arms winning more often. When the others came, they bore bad news about the whores, but good news about the alehouse. They shared out generous bowlfuls of beer for everybody and joined in the dicing. The captain remarked, I liked your priest. He doesn't waste his breath telling us what Christ would and wouldn't like. The priest looked down at his hands. Later, when the captain and the younger oarsman pissed over the side and the other oarsman went to fetch and instructment, Big Arms leaned very close to Thomas. You were there, weren't you? He said. Where? The boy pointed at the peak in Thomas's cheek. He nodded. I was there, Big Arm said. French crossmen mixed in with the salamis. I've got one of those too, he said, pointing at the scar again. But I won't show you where. Thomas laughed. They looked at each other for 2 heartbeats. They looked away. It occurred to Thomas that the Big Arms had it brought up Cressy while the others were ashore because he hadn't want to linger on that field too long. The man slapped Thomas on the back. There was nothing else to say about it. Now the older of the 2 oarsmen returned with his cornements and began to play it with some skill. The captain took off his leather shoes and beat time on the rift's dirty floor, and soon the other oarsmen and Big Arm started dancing. Thomas joined them, imitating their raftman's dance, which involved a lot of heel stamping and sliding of the feet in gritty boards, all done with the hands on the hips or linking arms. They called for the priest. We're only supposed to dance at Christmas and the feast of St. Nicholas and Catherine. Pure Matthew did sing, though. When the piper left his raftman's dance and played a Norman harvest song, the girls sang too, joining in on the second verse. For soon the winter's breath shall breathe the summer's greens away. Oh, but what care we with bread enough and instruments to play? Oh, Jean will cut us sheaves of wheat, and his 2 sons will blind them, while his daughters hide away where none of us can find them. Swing, ho, swing your scythe for God in his heaven, and if we do not work, he will not give us bread to leaven. Swing, ho, swing your scythe, for Mother Mary loves you, and as you sing your working song, she sings along above you. For the first time, Thomas allowed himself to think they might just get to Avignon, and whatever the girl had come to do might just get done. The raftsmen boarded 2 more vessels in the next 3 days. On a fishing boat manned by 2 frightened teenagers, both missing fingers, and their one-handed father, who surrendered their astonishing catch of a pike without incident. The other was a shallow-hulled sailing boat that tried to run. Big Arms cranked the windlass, while the younger oarsman and the captain shot bolt after bolt into the ship. A man with a partly colored cow took a quarrel in the hip, and he howled lamentably, while the other 2 fought over the limited shelter provided by a wooden chest aft. One getting his scalp gazed so he bled awfully, though the wound was not serious. Neither bothered about the rudder, and the quick little boat ran aground at a bend in the river, just as the distance was getting too great for real accuracy. Big Arms and the younger oarsman searched the boat, the latter pitching the man with the hip wound into the shallows to stop his caterwauling. He managed to scramble onto the bank and lip away in great loping spasms that made the captain laugh girlishly from where he sat his supervisory post, cross-legged atop the cabin. He laughed harder yet when the man collapsed in a field of goldenrod. The take was unimpressive. A few coins, a small drum, some extra clothes, 3 finches in wooden cages. The oarsman put his foot exactly next to the foot of the wooden man and then made him remove his leather boots. You idiots fled to save this shit, he said, trading shoes, handing the hurt man his worn-out slippers. The other man, a paunchy youth with soft hands, said, We did not wish to be harmed for our poverty. We were going to Avignon to seek work at the court of His Holiness. The man you pitched over is a great jester. Well, he sure runs funny. The oarsman presented the cages to the captain, who had leapt down from the cabin. He reached inside the cage, caught and panicked the panicked bird with some difficulty and wrung its neck, throwing it at the soft hands who was reaching for another cage when Delphine ran forward, just escaping the grasp of the priest who tried to stop her. She wrapped her arms around the cage and sat down, putting her hand over the door. The horseman tried to yank the cage away, but she held tight, letting him jerk her halfway to her feet. The captain instinctively drew back to strike her, but checked himself, sensing that Thomas had taken a step in his direction, also having noted that Big Arms was still on the other boat. He changed what would have been a vicious backhanded to a trousling of her hair, at which she grimaced, clutching the cage more tightly. Let her have the birds, the Wademan said, proud of his spontaneous magnanimity. Her papa had been useful. We thank you, the priest said, as Delphine set the cages down and opened their doors. Taking one docile bird and then the other into her hands, she kissed them both, then released them. One flew up into the sky, the other went towards the bank. The captain turned his head towards Thomas. Happy? He said. Thomas pulled Delphine behind him. So happy I could shit, he said, sheathing his sword. Big Arms got back on the raft. The uninjured man tended his friend's scalp. Nobody saw the second finch fly into the goldenrod, where it stayed for a moment before flying up again into the clouds. Neither did they see the jester now get on his feet and run towards a farmhouse in the distance, no longer limping. Interesting. Big Arms, whose Christian name was Gulami, had argued against it, but now it was happening. The captain, seeing that the foolish priest was sleepy, had given him unwanted wine to put him under so he might peek at what their passengers were carrying. Once the priest was asleep, the captain had looked into the knight's satchel even as the girl slept on it, and on the side of the gold had Matt in him. He took a chain and a few coins without waking her, but more lurked under her head. He called the Yellers to the rear of the raft and told them the time had come to bid their passengers farewell. Gulami and the other oarsmen wanted none of it. The oarsman was fine with piracy, but felt that harming paying passengers was kind of oath-breaking. Gulami, for his part, felt deeper loyalty to the knight who had also faced the English at Cressy and Penmathu than he now did his captain, whose arrogance and madness were worsening by the day. He said it went against his conscience to rob their guests, who had been good and useful companions. The captain had said, "The guild knows its own and has no loyalty to any other. It also saw fit to make me captain of this raft and master of you, even unto your life. We send them from this wicked world and take upon the guilt of their wealth. This is my command." Gillamy nodded his assent, but asked that the girl should be spared and brought to Abnagon, if she would go with them after. The captain had agreed, but Gillamy knew he was lying, and now it had begun. The oarsmen had their daggers out and were creeping towards Thomas as if towards a sleeping bear. The captain, holding a brutal, rusty falchion, was on his way to dispatch the priest, where he snored sitting up near his empty wine bowl. The stars were now very bright above them, and the rune was creeping slowly, lulling with its mutter, leaving the raft a steady platform for murder. Gillamy had his crossbow at the ready, and two other at his feet. If the knight stirred, he was to shoot him. The oarsman's knife was almost at the knight's throat. Gillamy only knew he was going to do it at a heartbeat before he did, and thought came to him and seemed so clear and correct that his fingers squeezed the lever almost on their own. He shot the oarsman. The man made a small gagging sound and jerked, reaching for the quarrel in his back. He dropped his dagger pommel first, and the sound woke Thomas. The younger oarsman looked at Gillamy with wide, betrayed eyes, and at that moment Gillamy's sight went black as the captain of Fishon struck him on the crown, and he fell. Thomas had been dreaming of his wife. She was crying, pounding the heel of her hand against the table and shaking with something between remorse and outrage. It seemed wrong that her small hand had made such a loud noise on the table, a noise like dropped metal, and Thomas opened his eyes to see two men standing over him, and one of them twisting, grabbing at his own back. The other turning now to look behind him. Farther down the raft, Big Arms went to his knees, and that figure had struck him, moved towards Thomas. He scooted forward on his butt and kicked the feet out from under the confused oarsman while he wounded one managed to touch the feathered part of the quarrel in him, the pain making him vomit all over himself. He fell suddenly and then laid still. Thomas just had time to get on his feet, taking a slash from the falchion that numbed his mailed forearm, and then kicked the captain in the hip to push him back. He used his still-sheathed sword to slap the younger oarsman across the head, knocking him down, and then he drew his sword. The girl was awake now, howling, "Stop! Stop!" at the brawling men, shaking the priest to wake him. The captain swung back, sheathed his falchion, and grabbed up his long spear. "Don't kill him," the girl yelled. "I won't if he jumps over," Thomas answered. Gillamy fell on his stomach and then struggled up on all fours, panting like a dog, trying to make sense of the chaos around him and the blood pooling under his face. The younger oarsman, also stunned, shook his head clear and dashed between Thomas and the captain. He grabbed the girl by her hair now and exposed her throat. The priest tried to grab his arms, but was viciously elbowed in the nose and fell backwards. Drop the sword or I'll open her, the orangeman said. Don't kill them, please, the girl yelled, as if she were not the one closest to death. Her hands were on the man's knife arm, but they were little more than a cat's paw would have been. Then she shut her eyes because she felt the orangeman's arms tense and knew he was about to cut her throat, except that he didn't. Big Arm Gillamy, blinking blood out of his eyes, had crawled over and now held the orangeman's arm from the outside, pulling them apart as slowly and irresistibly as a starfish opening a clam, clutching as hard as he could and hoping his blood-slick hands kept their grip. If he slipped, the other man's knife would all but cut the girl's head off. Don't! She yelled again now, and still at Thomas, who was coming at the captain. Ducking his spear slashes laterally, but unable to get inside because the other men circled so quickly. Gillamy had the orangeman's spread arm now, and the priest hit him in the face with his wooden bowl so hard that he broke it. The orangeman dropped his knife. Gillamy let the man's arms go, then heaved him over the side, passing out as he did so that one arm trailed in the cold water. The girl got to her feet, as so did the priest, and she stood behind him, wanting to jump between Thomas and the captain, but knowing the captain would kill her. Drop that horn thing and jump if you want to live, Thomas said to the wailed man. I don't need to live, the captain said. I've already seen the sea. And keeping his gaze deceptively on Thomas, he lashed out sideways with his spear, just missing the priest whom he would have impaled. The girl cried out in a startled squeak. Thomas attacked the spear rather than the man now, driving it down with his sword and stepping through it, breaking it off the first third. The captain, not missing a beat, whipped the remaining part of his shaft around and caught Thomas a glancing blow on the shoulder that also struck his head, rattling him through his chain hood. It wasn't enough. Thomas cut the man's arm off just below the elbow. He looked stupidly at where it lay and bent to pick it up with the remaining one. Thomas, the girl yelled at him. Thomas! She meant to make him spare the beaten man, if his life could still be at all, but her words had the opposite effect. The captain's jab at the priest had clipped her below the mouth, not much, but enough to beard her chin in blood. When Thomas saw that the girl was cut, he breathed out like a bull, grabbed the dazed captain's hair, yanked his head back, and cut his throat with the long notched blade. He took his time about it. The girl screamed, "No!" And then she just said, "No." And she let the priest take her in his arms, even though the tears she thought herself about to shed didn't come. The captain fell, so his head lolled back, and his open throat bled into the river. Thomas watched this for a moment, then wiped his sword. I told you not to, the girl said, but her face betrayed her relief that the hurting man was gone. We're going to pay for that, she said. I'm ready, said Thomas. I'm not, she said, and looked at the water. Thomas rolled the captain's limp body off the raft and it sank as it pulled down. Fucking hand. The raft drifted sideways into the darkness. When the sky got light enough for the work that had to be done, Gillamy bowed his head and let Thomas stitch him. Thomas had sat with Gillamy through the last hours of darkness, holding the captain's extra shirt to the wound, and the big man shivered and swore. The bone needle and the twine had also come from the captain's trunk. Gillamy was strong and he lived. For a time. That's it of chapter 21. I hope y'all enjoyed. I had a good time. I wonder how they're going to pay for killing that man. I truly don't know, but this book is so creative, It's hard to know what happens next. But I'll see y'all tomorrow for the next one. Have a good one. Oh, also, good morning, good evening, good night. I'll see y'all tomorrow.